Yeah.
I mean, like, I guess.
I figured we get the most exposure this way. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the first All 49ers roundtable. We are All 49ers with Sports Illustrated. I'm Grant Cohn. In the middle is Leo Luna. On the right is Jose Sanchez. We write every day, and we're going to be doing these hopefully about once a week for the rest of the year, around Thursday or Friday, usually to preview a game. But now in the offseason, we're going to be talking about the topics leading up to training camp, if it ever happens. So, Leo, why don't you go first, introduce yourself, and tell the viewers what you've been working on recently.
Yeah, well, obviously, my name is Leo. I've been writing with Sports Illustrated for about a month now, I would say. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was working on Fansided, doing San Francisco Giants articles. And recently, I've been writing on kind of all aspects of the game, whether it has to do with salary cap or how does the scheme fit in terms of Jamal Adams. Did a couple player interviews with Jamal Taylor, who signed with the team recently. And just definitely looking forward to growing with Sports Illustrated All 49ers.
Nice. Right. How about you, Jose?
And I've pretty much been writing with the team for about a year. This week, man, what has this been? It's been a wild week last week. First was like Kill's extension because of Chris Jones. I compared it to that, what that would have meant. And then the Mostert trade request. That one was like the juicier one that I know me and Grant love to pick on. For me in particular, if it was going to create a little bit of division in the locker room, because he's pretty much saying, I want out, could raise some eyebrows from some teammates or even some coaches in particular.
Yeah, we've been really, for most of June, we were struggling for things to write about. Not struggling, but digging deep. And now the last couple of weeks has been like a cornucopia. So why don't we let's start with Kittle. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through a few topics and have a discussion. Each person will say what they think, and we can go back and forth. And at the end, we'll take questions from the chat. So, Kittle, who wants to start it off? What do you two started off? What do you think is going on with Kittle?
Go ahead, Leo.
Kittle, what's going on with him is I just think it's the coronavirus, obviously, what's holding it up. I believe it's with York and Prague, what they've shown with the team is when it comes to their own players, they're hard to dish out a penny. When it came to guys that came from other teams, like Garoppolo had, 5 starts, and they dished it out to him pretty quickly.
Interesting.
D Ford came over from the Chiefs. They traded for him and dished it out pretty quickly. Yes, they did pay Armstead, but I'm talking about guys like DeForest Buckner and George Kittle level. Mm-hmm. They seem to have a little bit of issue once the dollar price is up here.
Right.
And so with the coronavirus affecting the team revenue, regardless of how many fans are going to be in the stands, they're going to miss that revenue. And I think that's what it has to do with it. When I look at George Kittle, I look at what the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. I'm a little bit into analytics. I'm not the hugest into that. I'm not a computer, basically. But I looked at it as the Chiefs paid Patrick Mahomes 28.5% higher than the second highest paid quarterback, which is Russell Wilson. So with the 49ers, they say, okay, Patrick Mahomes made 28.5 more. Kittle, we'll give you 30% or even 40% higher, which beats that percentage that Patrick Mahomes makes, because to say 20 million a year, that's doubling the market. That's just unrealistic. So I think they will probably settle around that 14.5 mark. But with the revenue that's going on, it seems unsettling of why the 49ers should pay him now when they essentially could tag him for $9 million next year and then $9 million after that.
But then it's also, if you tag them, it's almost of a little bit of a disrespect factor, because people, that's all pretty much like no player likes that franchise tag, even though just look at Washington, what they did with Kirk Cousins and Anthony Harris of the Vikings. I know he's not happy with that. Justin Simmons of the Broncos and such. So if you do that to Kittle, what is that saying to not only him, but to the rest of the team? It's like, hey, all right. Hey, buddy, we know we got to pay you. Tag. You're locked up with this for a year or so on and so forth, however long we see fit, until it reaches a number that we just don't want to agree to anymore. And so you're definitely right, Leo. When we even talked about it like over a month ago on your show, it's just when the future is blurry. with the cash revenue, the cash flow, and everything. I mean, that's why the NFL owners are going out there and making agreements to get that first 4 or 8 rows, however many rows it is, to get those advertisements. It's how to salvage some of that income. And so, had there been maybe more clarity, most likely more traction for a deal was coming. Now, let's look at it from Kittle's side. Obviously, he is more than a tight end. He is more than a wide receiver. He's a hybrid, obviously. He's pretty much an offensive player. He's an offensive player, and he can just do it all from blocking, from being a leader, from being a tremendous wide receiver. So you guys pretty much find like the median point of where you're going to see that break at the bank, and that's how you probably allude to for like at $14.5 million looking around. But it's also, you gotta include the guarantees, how many years you're going to sign them for, where the opt-outs, it's a lot more complex than that to some of these other position players where it's just like, all right, you're just this position, let me just like get you this number. But no, he's a very unique situation, because it's like, well, if you pay me higher than a tight end, it's good, but we know I'm more than a tight end, right? It's like with McCaffrey, why some people still like aren't too fond of his deal. He's more than a running back. That guy is a receiver too. So there's a lot of contributing factors here you got to tie into. And once again, the pandemic going on doesn't make it any better.
Right. And you mentioned the franchise tag. That's interesting. It makes me think of D Ford. The Chiefs gave him the franchise tag, and he immediately said, I'm not playing on that. So they traded him. A lot of times, if you give a top level player the franchise tag, what you're basically telling him is, we're going to trade you in a month. And it's interesting. You said like that it would be a slap in the face to Kittle. It's not that easy to just give him the tag. They didn't feel comfortable giving DeForest Buckner the 5th-year option. They could have had Buckner on the team right now making like $12 million, I think, in 12-ish in 2020, which would be a huge bargain, but it would have really, really upset him. And I think a player understands, like Kittle and Buckner, I can't be mad when I'm still on my rookie deal. I got to play that out. But if you keep me against my will beyond that, I can be mad. And there's things I can do. So I think that's pretty much where Kittle stands. He kind of has to suck it up for another year. But I'm interested to see what happens next year, because I think a lot of people just feel like, well, they're going to tag him. They got him, and they can keep him for cheap. But that's how I felt about Buckner last year. And then they traded him because they wanted to do right by him, or I don't know. So it seems to me that if Kittle holds at whatever number he wants, say it's 16, and the Niners aren't willing to go there, are they going to keep him against his will on the tag, or will they trade him like they traded Buckner? What do you guys think?
I think the Buckner situation is a little different. They could have kept him on the 5th-year option this year.
Right.
But they decided to, you know what, maybe Kinlaw can be Buckner in year 3 or 4, and we have that long-term on a rookie contract, rather than Buckner being paid $20 million in, say, what would that be, 2021?
2021, yeah.
Yeah, so let's look at, because I don't see their window as being right now. I see the 49ers window as could be as long as 5, 6, 7 years, because Jimmy Garoppolo, for NFL QB, he's still relatively young, and I think he can grow. So I believe their window is that far ahead, to where you lose a player like Javon Kinlaw for 1 year of DeForest Buckner. They decided to go with multiple years of Javon Kinlaw. And with Kittle, he just loves football. That's the hard thing to say, that he won't play on a franchise tag. The guy just loves football. And what I was going to touch on, Jose, is guaranteed money is everything to a lot of players, to the majority of players. But do you see Kittle being a guy that gets cut in a 5-year contract? I don't.
No.
So I don't think the guarantee really matters when it comes to Kittle. I think if you give him you're going to give him the most guaranteed for any tight end, but I don't think he needs to have it fully guaranteed or 14 guaranteed every single season. I think he'll settle for, say, around 8 guaranteed per season, and then on a 16 salary million per year. I think he'll settle on that, because, like I said, we all can agree he's not going to get cut in 5 years.
Yeah. No, definitely not. And to actually circle back to a point that Grant talked about is he going to get the DeForest Buckner treatment? I could kind of see that, but the reason why I don't is because I think the 49ers, they look things long terms. At least that's what that's what the crumbs on the table says about all their deals and just most of their moves. They probably envisioned that we have Buckner, we have Kittle. These two are going to break the bank. I believe Kittle is more worth topping out dollar in terms of, his position or whatever they want to do versus Buckner. Buckner, as great of a player he is, and he did get All-Pro, which I thought was a little bit teetering on the fence. He got his All-Pro. If we're picking between which of the two players is more valuable, it's Kittle. So they kind of essentially, how I saw it was, let's side with Kittle. Let's give him the money. We also have Eric Armstead, which didn't make the situation easier for them, which Buckner is the better overall player as Armstead, but the way Armstead's value is, he's versatile. So I guess they just saw him as more of the interchangeable piece, more value, essentially, more bang for their buck. So Kittle's situation, we can talk about like the pandemic's going on the whole time and that situation and everything, but essentially it's just about who they chose, and they chose the Kittle. So I think they're going to commit to him. But how I've also seen about rumors. Remember how they wanted to go after Austin Hooper?
Right.
I've seen some of that narrative being driven. What if they were thinking about replacing Kittle? And I don't think that's too far fetched given the way they handled Buckner's situation either. It's a little hard to really delve into that so much more speculation, but the way the 49ers front office coaches, they hold their cards very close to the chest.
Right.
It's a little bit hard to tell which direction they were looking at.
Right. So like the same thing could apply. I'm not saying they will, but there's supposed to be a tight end next year coming out of Penn State. I haven't really seen him play much beyond highlights. His name is Pat, Fryermuth or something. Yeah. Supposed to be really good. So maybe the Niners make the same decision that they'd rather have multiple years of this kid for cheap than really expensive years of Kittle. I'm not saying that's the case, but it's possible. The whole Kittle discussion is really heady and interesting because he's arguably a top 5 player in the league, regardless of position. And he's probably going to have to settle for way less than what he's probably worth for a bunch of reasons that are out of his control and aren't really fair. But at the same time, he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot of money, and the George Kittle story will have a very happy ending. So it's an interesting topic, but the topic that gets me a little worked up is Raheem Mostert. Because that guy, he's probably going to have a happy ending, but there's a significant chance that his story could go sideways. You were talking about guaranteed money, Leo. He has none left in his contract. Now he's a running back. Okay? He's 28. By the time he hits unrestricted free agency, he'll be 30. So the big payday isn't necessarily coming for Raheem the way it's coming for George. And if he suffers, if he pulls, I'm not going to say pulls or Jerick McKinnon, but if what happened to McKinnon happens to Mostert in camp where you suffer a serious injury, he's not going to make much money the rest of his life. And he could theoretically have to get like another job, like, become a real estate agent or something like that. And that shouldn't happen to a 49ers legend. I mean, I would consider him a legend after what he did in the playoffs. We're always going to remember Raheem Mostert for that. So let's talk. What do you guys think about what's going on with Mostert?
Go ahead, Jose. I know you wrote quite a few. So
I'm on the camp that you should never pay running backs. However, I'm gonna admit I'm a hypocrite on this one, but mainly because it's just $2 million. It's just $2 million. Here, throw you a little bone here. You know what? You kind of carried us to a certain degree to the Super Bowl. You rewarded that. I know all running backs optimized Shanahan's offense, but none did it close to the point of Raheem Mostert. That's why he led the league in yards per carry. I understand what some of the argue like, well, there's Tevin Coleman. Yeah, okay. Coleman's not as bad as some people want to play, aka Grant, but he's not Mostert.
He's all right. He's all right.
He's not Mostert. Yeah, he's all right. But come on, he's not Mostert. And I just think people are it's just $2 million, bro. It's top 10 money for running backs. Think about that, how no one's really paying running backs, although look at how much the Titans broke off Derrick Henry. But then again, look, they're rewarding him because they acknowledge, hey, we know Tannehill made a difference, but overall, you were the workhorse. Tannehill got the load off you. And same thing with Mostert. Hey, you got the load off Garoppolo in some certain situations, and you pretty much thrived. You were the golden child in this offense. So if it'd be one thing if you say, hey, I want a totally reworked deal, and I want so much more money. And there's also the other thing of, hey, look, he just signed a deal extension last year. It's his agent's fault. And I understand that too. It is to a certain degree, but hey, no one expected Mostert to get into this heavy role, pretty much being the feature back. I know he's not a starter, But starters irrelevant. How much did you produce? How much did you contribute? Which was a ton, which is more than I could say about Coleman outside of a few of the games. So please give Mostert his $2 million. It's enough. It's a little kicker right there.
Real quick, Leo, but this I want to mention. He was talking about the agent and incentives, and from what I understand, it's there were incentives in the contract built in. It's just they're usually built on like gross numbers, counting numbers. 1,000 yards rushing, and it's hard to hit those in an offense with a running back by committee. Probably in hindsight or in moving forward, agents are going to start doing it based on yards per carry, things like that. Anyway, Leo, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think really quick touch on what you said. I think that's key, and it's hard for any running back to hit in an incentive in a Shanahan offense, unlike Alfred Morris, that his which is very rare in Shanahan's offense. So. But touching on Raheem Mostert, it's hard because to say you're not paying Kittle, you're not paying Raheem, what does that say for guys going into next year that has an injury? They're all ball players. They'll play through it, but they do have a support system in their ear telling them, hey, it is a business. Sit out this one game.
That's right.
For players that have not received big-time contracts yet, why should they play 1 game, 2 game, 3 games through injuries if their franchise is showing that they're not paying the guys when they're worthy?
Also, the franchise's attitude toward Mostert is, hey, dude, it's a business. You signed a contract. Tough. Suck it up. So Mostert's attitude could be, hey, man, it's a business. You guys haven't taken care of me. In fact, you've made it real clear that you're taking care of yourself. So I got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
I got to think about my future.
Yeah. I'm not going to say, hey, I'm not going to play on this ankle. Like, I got to think about my future. I'm going to be 30 once my contract ends. I don't want to play on this ankle. I'm gonna sit out this game.
He could do that. He could do that. But just think about this. Maybe that message has already been sent to Mostert in a way, because what do they do with Trent Williams by operating in good faith with him, by giving him his money up front? So, hey, once again, what did we just say just like 10 minutes ago about, hey, look, D Ford, Jimmy Garoppolo, so on and so forth. Trent Williams, you didn't even play last year. But here you go. Here's your money, which honestly I had no issue with, because it's like, all right, this guy has trust issue with the franchise, and look at the news coming out of Washington. So that's already that looks like a bottom 10 story at this point. So I mean, I understood it. Hey, we're operating in good faith. Here it is. We want you to sign back because players first, and that's how pretty much they do it. But you're doing it in this case with Mostert. It's really sending a little bad taste in his mouth. I know, once again, most running backs will thrive, and the 49ers offense will likely still be very good with mostly any running back, but it's just about being that peak performance. That peak performance right there.
What's crazy about this organization is that, at least since Shanahan and Lynch have gotten here, it's not a meritocracy. Usually players prove themselves on the field, and the depth chart is shuffled accordingly. The contracts are arranged accordingly. No, on the Niners, it's all about who Kyle Shanahan thinks is the best. And usually that matches up with reality, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he has his own opinion, and feels very strongly about that. And it's pretty much he's the only person that feels that way. Like Tevin Coleman being better than Raheem, or needing to start over Raheem Mostert. Things like that. It's a good point that you would bring up Trent Williams, the need for the Niners to bend over backwards and give all this money to Quan Alexander, D Ford, players they see on other teams that they covet. But the players that they develop their own, they're like, well, I can develop another one.
Yep, exactly.
I don't like that.
Exactly.
That's message.
And like I'm always going to say, it's like people could say Raheem Mostert got cut by 7 other teams, but Shanahan is a wizard, and he saw the special teamer was the best running back on the team. If he wasn't the best running back on the team, he wouldn't have gotten those amount of carries. It would have been Matt Breida. And I believe they realized Matt Breida wasn't going to be on the team next year. Instead of trying to build his draft value, he got 0 carries in the Super Bowl, 0 touches. I don't even think he got an offensive snap.
Nope.
And so instead of trying to raise that stock in Breida, they decided to keep it with Mostert getting that share and not having to split the carries. Mostert is the most effective running back. And just really quick, do you think Jeff Wilson could do what Tevin Coleman can?
Yes.
I do.
Yes, and he's cheaper, and he's younger, and he has upside.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
You can see the limited amount of snaps he had. How many touchdowns did he have? Like 4 or 5 or something like that?
That's right.
And his limited touches? That's insane. Talk about making the most of your opportunity right there. If it wasn't a message being sent across there, then I mean, I don't know what to tell you. So I'm really excited to see Jeff Wilson. I talked to him like a few months ago. And this guy, I'm really excited for him. And the fact that we were mentioning Coleman, it's like, well, I mean, if we're saying that Shanahan could do with any running backs, poor Mostert, but we got Coleman. Like, all right, well, you could say poor Coleman, go cheaper and go Wilson. So, I mean, if we're going to play that game.
Yep. And one thing about Mostert real quick, I mean, just because he got cut by 7 teams doesn't mean that he was a bum or that he wasn't good. I mean, a lot of times these guys just need to get opportunities in a real game. I mean, if you've been at training camp, it's really hard to assess a running back when there's no tackling. You don't really know how far he would have went on that run. So when he had like 41 carries before 2019, he never got his shot. So that's why I kind of compare him to like Jeff Garcia or Kurt Warner. These are guys who went on to become Pro Bowl, in Warner's case, a Hall of Fame player who just never got an opportunity until he was like 30, 28. And it didn't mean he was bad. It just, he played at a small school. He didn't get drafted. He just wasn't part of the pipeline for whatever reason. It came in late. That's Mostert. I think he's the real deal. I don't think he's a one-year wonder, but I guess he'll have to prove that. Anyway, we need to talk about hot dogs and sandwiches. Jose, why don't you start this topic?
Well, if you're saying that I'm starting the topic, everyone's going to think I'm the one that's taking the wrong side. All right. All right, ladies and gents. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Is it? We've had this conversation. But I've seen this conversation forever. And who was one player that started it? Drum roll. Dante Pettis.
It was Dante Pettis. If people don't remember, during training camp, they usually do like once a week, just mic'd up sessions from camp, like a minute and a half. And one day Dante Pettis was mic'd up because he was supposed to be the number 1 wide receiver last season. And what he did that whole day was go around to every coach and player he could and asked, do you think, it might have been, I don't think it was. I think it was, it was something about forks and spoons in sports, man. What was it?
Yes.
It was forks and spoons, right?
If
you could never use one of a fork, spoon, or knife again, what would it be? That was what it was. If you could never use one of a fork, spoon, or knife ever again, what would it be? Okay, so forget the hot dog. We're talking about forks and spoons. And the reason we want to talk about that is because it was an insight into Dante Pettis' psyche. He's a very interesting person.
Yeah.
He has talent, but he's clinging to his career by a thread because of stuff like this, in my opinion. He's not the most dialed in to his profession compared to other teammates from what I've seen, but he's also a very interesting person who seems to think deep. So I'm not writing him off just yet. What do you guys make of Dante Pettis, and what do you think his future holds?
So you're knocking him because he doesn't post-workout videos every day, like Kendrick Bourne? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's the reason I'm knocking him.
Deal breaker. Go ahead,
yeah.
Leo.
Like I said in it, with you guys earlier, I wish I was a fly on the wall when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan were interviewing him pre-draft.
Yes.
Like, what was that conversation like? Was he asking about the hot dog? Was he asking about the fork and spoon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, what was going on? Like, would they ask him a question like on a route tree, and then he took it to some whole other level talking about cats or something? I don't know. He's an interesting player. He has all the talent, athletic ability. It's insane. We saw it his rookie year. And I thought to myself recently, would he fill that Emmanuel with Debo out right now? Like, could he do those routes that Emmanuel did last year? He didn't really go over the middle much. It was more comeback routes, little short digs that Jimmy hit him quick outs. So he stayed away from the majority of the linebackers. But then I noticed some in the Super Bowl where like Tyrann Mathieu just smacked him a couple times. And I thought to myself, would Dante Pettis hold on to that?
No.
Probably not.
No.
So,
Didn't we see an instant of that? Actually, the Pittsburgh game?
Oh, that was
didn't he get like smacked and then he like dropped there, or didn't he turn into a pick or something like that?
That's true. Over the middle. Yep, that's right.
Pettis, he could have held on to it. I mean, that's why when he scored the game winner, he's like, "Oh, he made up for it. Bygones be bygones."
True.
Now. So I mean, there goes our answer right there.
What I would say.
Go ahead, Leo.
What I would say is, I think they're done with Richie James. I think it's time to move on.
Done.
And I think if Pettis is on the roster, they can't really find a trade that they like.
Yeah.
He should 100% be their return man. Put him in open space. He did it in college and he did it really well. I just don't see him going through the middle and fitting this offense because that's what it's built on is inside the numbers, and he can't take a hit, and he's scared to take a hit.
He's just such a poor fit with Jimmy Garoppolo because Garoppolo's so comfortable throwing those passes over the middle. And I've seen it with Dante since his first minicamp practice in 2018. He alligator arms catches balls over the middle. He just does. And that doesn't mean he's a worthless wide receiver. He can get open down the field. He runs beautiful double moves. But for whatever reason, I think what the Niners were looking for in wide receivers changed fundamentally from 2018 to 2019. And maybe that's because they hired Wes Welker. Maybe because I know the position coaches do a lot of the scouting. And maybe it's just Welker's preference is to have stronger wide receivers. Because Dante Pettis, he does a lot of things well, but he's not running over anyone. And every wide receiver they've taken since then is much more muscled up. Guys who can actually create yards after contact like running backs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. He would fit more in an air point.
Yes,
that's a great point about Welker.
I think that must be it.
Yeah, I think you know what. Yeah, it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. It definitely probably plays a factor, at least to a certain degree. Because I mean, look, how many players can you say, oh, you can go in the slot and get some yak and take a hit? You can do literally everyone. Like there's not really. That's why it's kind of hard for me to see. Is Travis Benjamin going to make the team? I mean, I know he gives them that vertical threat. I know he's that veteran presence, but I mean, it's like he's that one player that doesn't fit that mold. That wide receiver offensive mold that we want to go inwards and not so much outwards and deep too much.
Well, it might come down to Benjamin or Pettis because if you're going to have one downfield threat on the team, those are the two guys. Benjamin averages 15 yards a catch. So does Pettis for their career. So maybe you pick one, and maybe the Niners go with Pettis because they're invested in him. They drafted him. He's young, but Benjamin's probably better than him.
Yeah, at this point, because I mean, as much as Benjamin's been injured his last 2-3 years tops, but when he's out there, he does damage. He's not an elite receiver or he's that great, but he's solid. In the role that the Niners can provide for him. Because I mean, even like years prior when I was like covering for the Raiders, stuff like that, watching Travis Benjamin dust the Raiders multiple times. This guy, like, I mean, he's very fluid up there, and at least if you keep him out there, you'll keep the defense somewhat honest. They'll probably play him like true at first, and maybe they won't cheat over or do anything like that because they want to see let's see if this guy's hammy is going to stay intact on this route first, and then over time let's see if he actually stays afloat.
I think he's better than Marquise Goodwin. I do.
Off top. What was Goodwin good for? Just other than running straight, he couldn't do anything with his breaks. He couldn't in cut too well. Didn't really have the greatest hands. It was just pretty much just all right, run straight. I mean, the fact that his value was taken to be as a gunner on punt return / punt cover, that said more about anything that any of us can elaborate to.
Also, on a team like this where you're not even like that's the last person you're going to be worried about is Travis Benjamin. If you go heavy, like 22 personnel with 2 tight ends and 2 running backs and do an aggressive play fake, Benjamin's the kind of guy who can just get wide open because the defense forgets about him. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how he does in training camp if there is a training camp.
Really quick, what I was going to say on that is you don't want to be too one-dimensional as well.
True.
You're going to have a defense. If you have no one that could run deep, they're all going to be within, 15 yards? At least with Benjamin, he's going to be able to take that safety over top and have him there to where you could have a guy like Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Ayuk do that over the middle route, and then now they're able to get more yak because now the safety is 15 yards downfield rather than being right there and getting the tackle immediately. That's what he provides.
I like that. No,
sure. That's why you keep it Benjamin. Like as much, it's like all right, you can cut him and it won't really like hurt you at all.
Right.
It's just it's a nice little wrinkle, Otherwise, it's like, hey, 20 yards and under, that's their offense. Don't worry about anything other than that. Then you see Benjamin, they're okay, we got to keep an eye on it. But maybe they do try seeing if they don't keep Pettis, seeing if someone else is capable of just going out there, not consistently or constantly, but just like, hey, they know Benjamin's going to go here, but hey, I don't know, just for conversation, say, hey, Bourne, you're going to go deep after he goes deep, and then we're just going to like psych them out. Like, I don't know. Can't Shannon's brain to that degree in terms of deep, because obviously otherwise I'd be a coach, but that's something that's definitely he could play the idea with.
I'm just curious to see what kind of speed Ayuk has, because people saying that he's faster than he showed at the combine. He had an injury. I'm curious to see, because if he has like Emmanuel Sanders speed, then they don't need Travis Benjamin. But really watching him on tape at Arizona State, I didn't notice him just dusting people down the sideline. On the other hand, the Niners really don't run that route or throw that pass very much. When they go deep, it's usually like a post route or something over the middle. So maybe Ayuk will be the guy. I don't know. I'm really eager to see him in camp. I'm just curious to see if that's ever going to happen. I have a feeling that the team might just push it back or pause it, or I don't know. I don't even want to ask you guys to predict the future because what's the point?
Yeah.
It just seems like training camp and preseason that they can almost push it back or cancel it entirely and see what happens in September. But
are they going to give you those no swaps as well?
I've already had one, man. It's awful. It doesn't hurt, but it's awful. All right, let's take some questions. If you guys have some questions for us, drop it in the chat section and we will answer them. We've been going on for about a half an hour. We can do about 10 more minutes. Unless you ain't got no questions, because we've pretty much covered everything. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
They pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of that. I mean, unless someone here wants to admit that they do think a hot dog is a sandwich, then in that case.
Let me ask you, I got a question. Do you guys think the 49ers ultimately will trade? Oh, okay. John Lynch's future and then Jamal Adams. So first question, what's up with John Lynch? What's the next move? And then final question, what do you think happens with Jamal Adams? So let's start with Lynch.
What is up with Lynch? That's a good question because, I mean, hey, Grant, are we still waiting on Kyle Shanahan to get announced as his deal yet?
They still haven't said it. They still haven't said
nothing. There's nothing but crickets there. So if you haven't heard nothing about his thing, we're not going to hear a dang thing about John Lynch right there. So, I mean, it's just I don't know what's going up with that. Everything's on pause, I feel like, with them. With the Mostert, of course, I think that's more of them holding their ground, and then Kittle not moving, and then Lynch not moving, and then Kyle Shanahan, we're not announcing anything. It's on a little pause right now, and I think that's more true because if you look at even what they're trying to figure out with preseason, what we were just talking about, hey, training camp's supposed to be in the next week or two, but hey, we haven't heard nothing either. So I think it's a little bit more in the NFL standpoint. It's trickling down to some of these teams and why they want to move slow because it's probably about, hey, we got bigger things to worry about. So that's a good question about Lynch. I'm not sure how much they really think he's responsible 100% on those drafts because there's no way. If you're telling me, Lynch calls all the shots in those draft rooms, then let's not be naive. You think he traded up for Brandon Ayuk? That was totally Shanahan. And Shanahan pretty much admitted, hey, I love Kinlaw. I love going defensive lineman. Let's go Kinlaw. And then Lynch was probably like, all right, yeah, defensive guy. So, that's a tricky one. Why haven't they said anything?
Well, I got theories, but Leo, you go first.
I have a theory as well. I have zero facts on this.
Let's talk theories.
Yeah. And Shanahan, Lynch, what he talked about when he came out of the booth was being competitive, having that competitive energy, that competitive fire. That's what made him want to do that transition. Maybe they haven't announced Shanahan yet because they're trying to figure out what's going on with John Lynch. Does he want an extension or does he want to move higher within the team as far as president? Like, what does he want to do? So maybe Lynch has those offers on the table and they're waiting for him to decide. Once he decides, that's when they're going to go public with Shanahan, and we'll see from there. That's my theory, is they're waiting for John Lynch to make a decision on what he wants to do, whether continuing to be GM or move up in a higher position.
Perfectly reasonable theory. I have a different theory. Okay, let me try this one out. So remember last year, there was that report from Matt Miller of Bleacher Report that said there was a rift between Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. He got specific too. I mean, he's basically citing a scout in the organization who probably got fired. So one guy who overheard something and maybe took it out of context or didn't, but he basically said there was a big fight between Lynch and Shanahan and that Shanahan didn't necessarily trust Lynch's vision for the team for the future. And everyone said that was a bogus report. And the Niners laughed it off. Lynch and Shanahan laughed it off. And Matt Miller was quiet. But Matt Miller he's not like an up-and-comer. He's been around. He's serious. I don't think he would just tarnish his own reputation. Maybe he heard wrong. But I've always kind of stored it away. Then we see in the Super Bowl that moment at the end of the first half where John Lynch is asking for the timeout and Shanahan doesn't take it. Seems like they're not necessarily in 100% lockstep. But it doesn't mean they don't like each other. I'm just remembering this stuff. And now we're here where Shanahan gets the extension and Lynch doesn't. To me, it's a slap in the face to Lynch unless I'm not understanding something. To me, it's telling him we value Shanahan more than you. And I'm guessing what Lynch has to decide is, do I want to stay here even if I have less power? Or do I want to go back to being a broadcaster? because they'll probably pay me about the same amount of money. And I was good at broadcasting, and it's an easier job. So I guess I have a more cynical theory, but I can't help but notice that John Lynch hasn't tweeted since May 23rd. And to me, that's him saying, I don't know if I'm still the face of this organization. I don't know if I'm still the voice of this organization. I feel uncomfortable communicating in any way. He didn't congratulate Kyle Shanahan for getting an extension. He hasn't really, he's been underground for almost 2 months. So I don't know what to make of it.
How did he get that position in the first place?
Tell us.
He reached out to Kyle Shanahan.
That's right. That's right. So he got the job because of Kyle.
So
and now it seems like if he gets an extension, it'll be because Shanahan wants him to get one. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
that's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, and what if John Lynch, taking the team from where they were, which is awful, what if John Lynch wants more credit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he wasn't the exact person that they were going to have to interview until Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
And what if he wants more credit? It's a honest question.
Yeah. You know, I look, he's had some misses in the draft or up high. Keller Witherspoon, Reuben Foster, Solomon Thomas. But he's also made some very, very good moves. And I rag on Jimmy Garoppolo all the time, but that was Lynch. You know, Shanahan wanted Kirk Cousins, and I like Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins doesn't have a winning track record like Jimmy Garoppolo. Give Lynch credit for that. So I don't think it's necessarily right or fair for Jed to give 100% of the credit to Kyle. Remember, there's no salary cap for the front office. It seems to me a little bit of a petty, cheap move to not also give Lynch an extension. They can afford it. He's worthy. Give it to him. Hook him up.
I don't think it's fair to blame Solomon Thomas completely on Lynch either. Because, yes, he went to Stanford. John Lynch went to Stanford. But let's keep in mind, Kyle Shanahan said he builds teams from the trenches.
Correct.
What if John Lynch wanted a quarterback? What if he didn't, deep in his heart, he did not want Kirk Cousins playing?
Yeah, exactly. How could he force a quarterback on his head coach who got him the job and wants Kirk Cousins? What's he gonna do?
And you know what? Maybe he did. You know what, Lil? I'm gonna play off that. Maybe he did want a quarterback because he's the one that initiated and conducted that Jimmy Garoppolo trade. And Shanahan didn't want it. He told me and Grant were at the presser, and he even admitted it. Kyle Shanahan, oh wait, everyone knows I wanted Kirk, and I was waiting out on him. And that's why we didn't even scout Patrick Mahomes. You know, that's why he literally says, I remember it vividly. Oh yeah, John just tells me, he comes, hey, we have this trade. We can get Garoppolo for this. And he's like, what? Huh? What? Okay, and then he literally said, he said he sat on it for the whole day and just said like, yeah, fire it away. You know, the heck with it.
And then he said he went into a mini depression for a few days after it.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
Give John some credit, man. They wouldn't have Jimmy Garoppolo if it weren't for John. They'd have Kirk Cousins making $30 million a year guaranteed.
And that's one where I think a GM, it's never good where I think where GMs and head coaches need to agree with each other. It's good to have that tuck and pull because one of them protects each other from the other. You know, just look at what some of the other teams are doing out there. Bill O'Brien, you know, John Gruden, two nutcases who have too much power. They don't have, well, the Raiders do now. Just have someone like check them like, hey, you know, I got to protect you from yourself. You're a little too irrational here now. So that's John Lynch right there. Hey, Jimmy Garoppolo, don't wait on Cousins. This is a guarantee, and I don't even think Cousins that great to begin with. You know, and they messed up from the moment they didn't take Deshaun Watson over Solomon Thomas instead, which maybe, and I would even lean towards he did. John Lynch wanted him, and so that's a perfect example of why maybe even Shannon's like, you went behind my back and did this trade a little bit, and thinking bigger picture. Hey, good job for improving the team. But no, that's some of these coaches have a little bit of ego, no matter who you look at. Kyle Shanahan does to a degree. That's why he gets so cute on the goal line with his play calling because he's just like, hey, watch this work. You know, he likes to flex a little bit. So probably the fact that he thought you went behind my back with that Garoppolo trade versus just being appreciative. That probably not saying that really was detrimental to severity, but it's little things like that could probably trickle on and just really can irk some of these guys.
Yeah. I got one more theory. I think that 2018 season was very painful for the 49ers. They said it was all part of the process and they understood they were going to lose when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. But even after that, I mean, they lost 2 games to the Cardinals. They lost a game to the Cardinals where they outgained them by 300 yards. It was a very difficult season. And I think it was embarrassing at times, some of those home losses. And I think it's only natural when you have a season like that internally you have finger pointing. it's your fault. We should have done it this way. We shouldn't have done it that way. And that's why when Matt Miller said that there was a fight at the end of the year, it seems like only natural. I mean, if there's not a fight between the top guys of a team that just went 4-12 in their second year, then something's wrong. So it sounded right. And then what happens in 2019, where there's all this success, maybe Shanahan says, see, I was right. And Lynch says, well, no, I was right. And then there's this power struggle that you're not aware of. But maybe I'm just guessing. And maybe they'll announce this thing in 5 minutes and John Lynch will be here for 10 more years and we won't even air this.
Yeah.
But until then, I think this is fair comment. Should we talk about Jamal Adams or is that just not worth it? Do you guys have anything you want to say or do we just need to wait and see on that one?
I'm leaning towards not getting Jamal Adams now.
Okay, tell me why.
At first I was because I think they need to sit for a year and go get Joey Bosa. Chargers, when do they pay top dollar for anybody?
When do the Niners pay top dollar for anybody?
If they go to a different team.
Got him.
Hey, good point.
So I believe he is a candidate to be tagged and trade next year. On a tag and trade, what do teams usually get? Like a second? The Seahawks got Clowney for a third. I think you could get Joey Bosa for probably just a first to get that deal. Maybe even a second and a third. And that's why I think they need to sit and wait for that. Cut ties with D Ford. Go get Joey Bosa. He's a way better player, way more proven than D Ford has been in this league. And I think you could get Jaquiski Tart, he has dropped some interceptions. He is nowhere near Jamal Adams' level, but he is a top 10 safety in the league. So if you could retain a top 10 safety on a cheaper deal and then make a trade possibly next offseason to get Joey Bosa, instead of being stuck with, D Ford, who's could only play about 25% of the snaps, and then Jamal Adams. I would rather go get Jaquiski Tart and a Joey Bosa.
Interesting. What do you think of that?
I think I'm gonna agree with Leo to a certain extent. Hold off for this year, but for my reasoning, it's a couple. It's one, it's hold off on Jamal Adams because you're probably gonna have a new defensive coordinator in 2021. So let's not put someone in Adams because Adams he's a dual threat, but overall I think he's skewed more towards being a box safety. And that's what's something I loves about why Saleh loves having Ward and Tart is because he can do both with them. And it kind of keeps disguising his coverages, which is awesome. And that worked a lot to make the pass defense better than it was. But Adams, don't trade for him now. Don't even trade for Bosa. You're going to keep Bosa for a year, and you're going to have to extend him after giving up draft capital. If anything, if that's the case, then let's just trade for Adams now because then at least you have him for this year and next year. But then for me, it's just, just don't even touch either. Because then it's especially Adams, because then if his cost is going to be much higher than it would be for a Bosa because of, like I said, 1 year left on his deal because he is franchise tagged. But if you do Adams, then I'm just getting too much similarity with what the Los Angeles Rams did and Jalen Ramsey. Maybe not costing that high of a degree because I think the Niners would even cap themselves. Although they did say they were in Khalil Mack a couple years ago. So they are known. They should be known that, hey, when a deal like this emerges, they could be up for it. Then again, that Khalil Mack deal probably was Kyle Shanahan because he likes building from the trenches. A safety, Jamal Adams, might be something different. But overall, a move like this, it just feels like it's too much of the Rams. Let's learn from the Rams' mistake and not do that. Because if anything, you're right, Lily. Tart is not bad. Let's just, if you're going to do that, but retain him. But Adams is so good. So it's like, it's a little bit I'm torn here. But my brain and logic is going to tell me just don't touch Adams. Don't touch him because of the draft capital is going to come there. Because you hardly have draft capital anyways to begin with going forward. And it's really a tough sell for me on him.
Okay, let me sell you. I'm saying I still think this is going to happen. And to me, he reminds me of Troy Polamalu. I don't know if you guys remember. You remember Troy Polamalu.
Come on.
Yeah, you guys ain't that young. All right, sorry. So sorry about that. Here's what I think. I mean, the Jets don't want to trade him. They're probably not going to trade him for a while unless they get blown over by a deal. But eventually they will. Coming down to the trade deadline, they're going to have to give him up if he doesn't want to be there. And the way I see it is the 40. I know you, Leo. You said that the Super Bowl window could extend 5-6 years. In the NFL, if it's open now, you don't know what's going to happen down the line. And I think if they get Jamal Adams, to me, they become the instant favorites to win the Super Bowl. You could argue they're the favorites already, but I don't think they are. I think they're in the conversation. They're top 5. But when they get Adams, if they get Adams, they're right there, or if not above the Chiefs. So that's really important. And then finally, we like Tart, we like Jimmy Ward, and they both played well last year. But let's say, what do we know them for? Getting hurt. So let's say Jimmy Ward gets hurt week 2, or Jaquiski Tart. That creates even more urgency for the 49ers to do this. If Jimmy Ward breaks his arm or does something where he has to miss 2 months or 3, you got to make this trade. So I think I already think I've heard that they're interested. I know that they're interested. And I think that they're going to make sure that they're among the final suitors like they were with Khalil Mack. But if something happens to one of those starting safeties, I think things could accelerate quickly. That's it. That's 45 minutes.
Not to Jimmy Ward.
Not to Jimmy Ward.
No.
I'm just saying.
Ward would fill in pretty well.
Good point.
So it wouldn't necessarily ramp up anything for Jimmy Ward being hurt.
Fair enough.
But
you remember last year when Tart went down, what happened to the defense?
Yeah, he's missed 19 games in 3 seasons. That's right. Important.
That's right. And the reason he misses games is on him. He often throws his body around. Like he'll dive into ankles, knees, thighs, and he'll break his forearm, separate his shoulder. Yeah, and you appreciate a strong safety who throws his body around, but at the same time,
the game's different.
Yeah, and you got to protect yourself. The team needs you for 16 games a year, not 9.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, this was cool. Let's plan on. We'll let you guys know, but next Thursday or Friday, we're going to do another one. All right, and we're going to have probably more writers with us next time.
Yes, sounds good.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate you all.